Mark chapter 6. And he went out from there, and came into his own country, and his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath day had come, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many hearing him were astonished, saying, From where does this man get these things? And by what wisdom is this which is given to him, that even such mighty works are performed by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joses, and of Juda and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him. But Jesus said to them, A prophet is not without honor except in his own country, and among his own relatives, and in his own house. And he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick folks and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief, and he went about the villages teaching. And he called to him the 12, and began to send them out 2 by 2, and gave them power over unclean spirits, and commanded them that they should take nothing for their journey except a staff, no scrip, no bread, no money in their purse, but be shod with sandals, and not put on 2 coats. And he said to them, In whatever place you enter into a house, stay there until you depart from that place. And whoever shall not receive you or hear you, when you depart from there, shake off the dust under your feet for a testimony against them. For certain, I say to you, it shall be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrha in the day of judgment than for that city. And they went out and preached that men should repent. And they cast out many devils, and anointed many with oil that were sick, and healed them. And King Herod heard of him, for his name was spread abroad, and he said that John the Baptist had risen from the dead, and therefore mighty works are showing themselves in him. Others said that it is Elijah, and others said that it is a prophet, or as one of the prophets. But when Herod heard about it, he said, It is John, whom I beheaded. He has risen from the dead. For Herod himself had sent out and laid hold on John, and bound him in prison for Herodias' sake, his brother Philip's wife, for he had married her. For John had said to Herod, It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. Therefore Herodias had a quarrel against him, and would have killed him, but she could not. For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just man and holy, and observed him, and when he heard him, he did many things, and heard him gladly. And when a convenient day had come, that Herod on his birthday made a supper to his lords, high captains, and chief estates of Galilee. And when the daughter of the said Herodias came in, and danced, and pleased Herod and those that sat with him, the king said to the damsel, Ask of me whatever you will, and I will give it to you. And he swore to her, Whatever you shall ask of me, I will give it to you, up to half of my kingdom. And she went out and said to her mother, What shall I ask? And she said, The head of John the Baptist. And she came in immediately with haste to the king, and asked, saying, I desire that you give me by and by on a platter the head of John the Baptist. And the king was exceedingly sorry. Yet for his oath's sake, and for their sakes which sat with him, he would not reject her. And immediately the king sent an executioner, and commanded his head be brought, and he went and beheaded him in the prison, and brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the damsel, and the damsel gave it to her mother. And when his disciples heard of it, they came and took up his corpse, and laid it in a tomb. And the apostles gathered themselves together to Jesus, and told him all things, both what they had done, and what they had taught. And he said to them, Come, gather yourselves apart into a desert place, and rest a while, for there were many coming and going, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. And they departed into a desert place by ship privately. And the people saw them departing, and many knew him, and ran by foot from there out of all of the cities, and preceded them, and came together with him. And Jesus, when he went out, saw many people, and was moved with compassion toward them, because they were as sheep, not having a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when the day had now been nearly over, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desert place, and now the time is past. Send them away, so that they may go into the country round about, and into the villages, and buy for themselves bread, for they have had nothing to eat." He answered and said to them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and buy 200 pennyworth of bread, and give it to them to eat?" He said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they found out, they said, 5, and 2 fish. And he commanded them to make all the people sit down by companies on the green grass. And they sat down in ranks by hundreds and by 50s. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed, and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. And they all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments and of the fish. And those that ate of the loaves were about 5,000 men. And right away he constrained his disciples to get into the ship, and to go to the other side to Bethsaida, while he sent away the people. And when he had sent them away, he departed into a mountain to pray. And when evening had come, the ship was in the midst of the sea, and he was alone on the land. And he saw them struggling and rowing, for the wind was contrary to them. And about the 4th watch of the night he came to them, walking on the sea, and would have passed them by. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit, and cried out. For they all saw him and were troubled. And immediately he talked with them, and said to them, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." And he went up to them into the ship, and the wind ceased. And they were terribly amazed in themselves beyond measure, and wondered. For they did not consider the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. And when they had passed over, they came into the land of Gennesaret, and drew to the shore. And when they had come out of the ship, immediately they knew him, and ran through that whole region round about, and began to carry about in beds those that were sick, where they heard he was. And wherever he entered into villages or cities or country, they laid the sick in the streets, and sought him that they might touch, if it were but the border of his garment. And as many as touched him were made whole.